The first time I realized my parents loved my sister Lily more than me was on my 8th birthday. I'd been waiting all day for the special chocolate cake Mom had promised, the one with buttercream frosting and rainbow sprinkles that had become our family's birthday tradition. When evening came, I bounced excitedly in my chair at the dining table, waiting for the moment when the lights would dim and my cake would appear, candles flickering in the darkness. Instead, Mom rushed in with a store-bought vanilla sheet cake, the kind with stiff, overly sweet frosting and a generic "Happy Birthday" written in blue gel. Dad followed behind, looking distracted as he checked his watch. "Sorry, Chelsea," Mom said, placing the cake in front of me. "We ran out of time to make your special cake. Lily had her dance recital today, and you know how important that was." At that moment, Lily twirled into the room in her pink tutu, still riding the high of her performance. She was only 6 then, all golden curls and dimpled cheeks, while I was the awkward older sister with unruly brown hair and knobby knees. "Mommy, can I have the first piece?" Lily asked, already reaching for the cake knife. "It's Chelsea's birthday," Dad said, but his tone lacked conviction. "But I suppose you can help cut it." I watched as my sister took center stage at my own birthday party, cutting my cake and getting frosting all over her fingers while my parents cooed at how adorable she was. I blew out my candles without making a wish. What was the point? I was learning early that wishes didn't come true, at least not for me. That pattern continued throughout my childhood. Lily needed new dance shoes. I could make do with hand-me-downs. Lily deserved private piano lessons. I could learn from free tutorials online. Lily's artwork deserved expensive frames and prominent display on the living room wall. My honor roll certificates were magneted to the refrigerator until they yellowed and curled at the edges, eventually disappearing altogether. It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They never hit me or screamed at me or locked me in closets like the parents in those Lifetime movies. They fed me, clothed me, and made sure I did my homework. They just didn't see me. Not really. I was the reliable one, the one who didn't need much attention because I could take care of myself. Lily was the delicate flower who needed constant nurturing and praise. By the time I turned 16, I had resigned myself to my place in the family hierarchy. I kept my head down, got good grades, and stayed out of trouble. I didn't expect my parents to come to my debate competitions or softball games anymore. I learned to be my own cheerleader. That summer, I decided I needed a job. Not because my family was struggling financially. Dad's engineering position at K-Tech Industries and Mom's real estate career kept us firmly in the upper middle class bracket, but because I wanted something that was mine. Money that I earned, that I controlled, that couldn't be redirected to Lily's latest passion. I applied to every business within biking distance of our suburban home and finally landed a position at Mapleview Cafe, a cozy little coffee shop downtown. The owner, Diane, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines etched deep around her eyes. She took a chance on me despite my lack of experience, and I was determined not to let her down. "I need someone reliable," she told me during my interview, glasses perched on the end of her nose as she scrutinized my application. "Someone who shows up on time and doesn't spend their shift texting friends. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied, sitting up straighter. "I'm very reliable." She hired me on the spot, and I started the following Monday after school. The work was harder than I expected, memorizing drink recipes, dealing with impatient customers, staying on my feet for hours at a time, but I loved every minute of it. For the first time, I was being recognized for my own merits. When Diane nodded approvingly as I correctly prepared a complicated order, or when customers thanked me with genuine smiles, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. My first paycheck was modest, but it felt like a fortune to me. $237.42 for 2 weeks of after-school and weekend shifts. I held the check in my hands, marveling at the fact that I had earned it all by myself. I deposited most of it into a savings account I had opened, keeping $50 in cash. That weekend, I treated myself to a trip to the mall, Not the upscale one where Mom took Lily shopping for designer clothes, but the older one across town that had discount stores and a food court with sticky tables. I bought myself a pair of earrings, simple silver studs that cost $18, and a paperback novel I'd been wanting to read. Then I sat in the food court, eating chicken teriyaki and reading my new book, feeling a sense of independence I had never experienced before. The food wasn't great and the chair was uncomfortable, but everything tasted better when I paid for it myself. For 2 months, I maintained this secret life. I went to school, worked my shifts at the cafe, and squirreled away my earnings. My parents barely noticed my absence. They were too busy with Lily's expanding schedule of activities. That summer, she had decided she wanted to be an actress, which meant driving her to auditions for community theater productions and youth acting workshops. I had almost saved enough for the laptop I wanted, not the latest model, but one that would be mine alone, not the family computer where Lily always had priority for her research, which mostly consisted of watching YouTube videos of her favorite celebrities. Just 3 more paychecks, and I could order it online. Then one evening in August, I came home from my shift to find both my parents sitting at the kitchen table, their expressions serious. A printed copy of my work schedule lay between them. "Were you going to tell us about this job?" Dad asked, his voice measured in that way that meant he was controlling his anger. I froze in the doorway, my barista apron stuffed into my backpack. "How did you—" "Mrs. Blackwell saw you working at that cafe," Mom interrupted. "She came in for coffee and recognized you. She mentioned it to me at book club last night." Mrs. Blackwell was one of Mom's real estate colleagues, a gossipy woman with shellacked hair who always wore too much perfume. I could just imagine her delight in having information about me that my own mother didn't know. "I wanted to earn my own money," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "That's not the issue," Dad said. "The issue is that you've been lying to us for months." "I never lied," I countered. "You never asked where I was going." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had made a mistake. Dad's face darkened. "Don't get smart with us, young lady," he warned. "You deliberately kept this from us, and that's the same as lying." Mom sighed, running a hand through her perfectly highlighted hair. "Chelsea, we're not against you having a job, but as part of this family, you need to contribute." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "We've decided that since you're earning money now, you should help with household expenses," Dad continued. 50% of your earnings will go toward family costs." My heart sank. 50%? But that's half of everything I make. "That's fair," Mom said firmly. "You live here, eat our food, use our utilities. It's time you learned about financial responsibility." I thought about protesting, pointing out that my 16-year-old self wasn't legally responsible for family expenses, but the set of their faces told me it would be useless. Besides, they weren't wrong about me using family resources. It was the fair thing to do, wasn't it? "Okay," I agreed quietly. "I'll give you half." What I didn't say was that my dream of buying my own laptop had just been pushed months into the future. What I didn't ask was whether Lily, who received a generous allowance for doing minimal chores around the house, would ever be expected to contribute financially to the family. I knew the answer already. That fall, as I juggled school, debate team, and my job at the cafe, I began to notice where my contribution to family expenses was actually going. New dance costumes for Lily, private acting coaches for Lily, a weekend trip to Chicago for Lily to attend a youth theater workshop. When I quietly pointed this out to Mom one evening, she bristled. "Your sister has extraordinary talent, Chelsea. These are investments in her future. One day when she's a famous actress, she'll take care of all of us." I bit my tongue to keep from asking who was investing in my future. My junior year of high school passed in a blur of early mornings, late nights, and the constant struggle to keep my grades up while working nearly 20 hours a week. My parents now expected my financial contribution, as a matter of course, and I handed over half of each paycheck without comment, watching as it disappeared into the black hole of Lily's pursuits. The summer before my senior year, I received a modest raise. At the cafe, Diane pulled me aside one morning before opening. "You're one of the best employees I've ever had," she said, uncharacteristically emotional. "Always on time, never complaining, and the customers love you. I'm increasing your hourly rate by $1.50. I thanked her profusely, already calculating how much extra I would earn per week. But my excitement was tempered by the knowledge that half of that increase would never see my bank account. That evening at dinner, as Lily regaled our parents with stories from her summer theater camp, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell my parents about my raise. I would continue giving them the same amount I had been, which was already substantial, and keep the additional money for myself. It wasn't dishonest, I reasoned. I was still contributing half of what they thought I earned. For the first time, since I had started working, I felt a small sense of control returning to my life. As my senior year progressed, I poured my energy into college applications. My grades were excellent, and my debate coach wrote me a glowing recommendation. I applied to state schools mostly, knowing that even with scholarships, I would need to be practical about costs. One evening in December, as I sat at the kitchen table filling out yet another scholarship application, Dad walked in and glanced over my shoulder. "University of Michigan," he read. "That's ambitious. Have you considered community college instead? It would be more affordable." I looked up at him, confused. "But you always said I should aim high for college. You and Mom both went to good schools." He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but things are different now. College costs have skyrocketed, and with Lily's arts education to consider—" "Lily's only a sophomore," I interrupted. "She won't be in college for 2 more years. We're looking at performing arts high schools for her," he explained. "The one in Pittsburgh has an excellent reputation, but it's expensive. We need to start saving now." I stared at him, the realization dawning slowly. My college fund, the one they had promised existed since I was a child, had been depleted, diverted to Lily's pursuits. I had been contributing to household expenses while they were planning to send my sister to a private art school. I said nothing that night, but something hardened inside me. I redoubled my efforts on scholarship applications and started researching. Student loans. I would find a way to pay for college myself if I had to. In February, an unexpected lifeline appeared. My grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother, called me directly on my cell phone, something she rarely did. "Chelsea," she said, her voice crackling over the line. She lived in a small town about 3 hours away and had never quite mastered the art of cell phone conversations. "I hear you've been applying to colleges." "Yes, Grandma," I replied, cradling the phone as I folded laundry in my bedroom. "I'm hoping to hear back from a few schools soon." "Your father mentioned you might need to consider community college," she continued. "Is that true?" I hesitated, reluctant to speak ill of my parents. "Well, college is expensive, and with Lily's arts education—" "Nonsense," she interrupted firmly. "You're a bright girl, with excellent grades. You should go to the best school that accepts you." I was silent, unsure how to respond. "I've been saving," she continued, "for both my granddaughter's education. Your grandfather and I started accounts when you were born. I always planned to help with college, but it seems you might need that help more immediately than I thought." Tears sprang to my eyes unexpectedly. "Grandma, that's incredibly generous." "It's not generosity, it's fairness," she corrected. "I love Lily dearly, but I've observed how things work in your household. I was hoping your parents would, well, never mind that now. The point is, I have money set aside for your education, and I want you to use it." We spoke for nearly an hour, discussing my college prospects and making plans. By the end of the call, I felt lighter than I had in years. For once, someone was putting me first. In March, the college acceptance letters began arriving. I was admitted to several good schools, including the University of Michigan. When I shared the news with my parents, their response was lukewarm. That's nice, honey," Mom said distractedly as she reviewed Lily's application to the Pittsburgh Art School. "But have you considered the costs?" "Actually," I said, a newfound confidence in my voice, "Grandma Eleanor has offered to help with tuition." That got their attention. Dad looked up sharply. "My mother? She never mentioned anything to me about paying for your college." "She called me directly," I explained. "She's had a college fund for me since I was born." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. I suspected they had known about Grandma's fund all along, but had hoped to redirect it toward Lily's education or convince me to choose a less expensive path. "Well," Mom said finally, "that's very generous of her, but we should discuss this as a family. College isn't just about tuition. There are living expenses, books, travel costs. I've been saving," I cut in, "and I'll continue working through college. Between Grandma's help, scholarships, and my savings, I can make it work." The look of surprise on their faces might have been comical if it hadn't been so revealing. They had underestimated me, my determination, my resourcefulness, my ability to forge my own path. 2 weeks before high school graduation, I made another decision. After a long phone conversation with Grandma Eleanor, I asked if I could move in with her for the summer before college. To my relief, she enthusiastically agreed. "I have plenty of space," she said, "and it would be wonderful to have some company. This old house gets quiet." When I announced my plans to my parents, they were surprisingly acquiescent. Perhaps they realized I was slipping from their control, or maybe they were simply relieved to have one less person to consider as they focused on Lily's future. Lily, however, was distraught. "You can't leave," she insisted, barging into my room. As I packed my belongings. At 15, she had grown into her beauty, with our mother's delicate features and our father's striking blue eyes. "Who's going to help me run lines for auditions?" "Mom and Dad can help," I replied, carefully folding my debate team sweatshirt. "It's not the same," she pouted. "You're better at giving feedback." I paused, studying my sister. Despite everything, I didn't hate Lily. It wasn't her fault that our parents had placed her on a pedestal. She had grown up believing she was exceptional, because that's what she had been told every day of her life. "I'll only be a phone call away," I said gently. "And I'll come back for visits." She flopped dramatically onto my bed. "It won't be the same. Nothing will be the same." For once, we agreed on something. The day after graduation, I packed my modest belongings into my used Honda Civic, purchased with my cafe earnings and a small loan from Grandma, and headed to her home in Maplewood, the small town where my father had grown up. Grandma Eleanor's house was a Victorian with peeling paint and a wide front porch. It needed work, like most houses built in the 1900s, but it was clean and comfortable and filled with books. More importantly, it was a place where I felt welcome. "The blue room is yours," she told me as she showed me upstairs. "It gets the morning sun. I thought you'd like that." The room was larger than my bedroom at home, with tall windows and faded floral wallpaper. A quilt in shades of blue and white covered the four-poster bed. "It's perfect," I said, setting down my suitcase. "This was your father's room when he was a boy," she commented, straightening a picture frame on the dresser. "He was a serious child, always with his nose in a book. Much like you." I smiled, trying to imagine my father as a boy in this room, before he became the man who saw his daughters through such different lenses. That summer with Grandma Eleanor was transformative. For the first time, I lived in a household where I wasn't constantly competing for attention and resources. Grandma had her routines and expectations: beds made in the morning, dishes washed after meals, a strict no-shoes policy indoors, but she also gave me space to be myself. I found a job at a local bookstore, working fewer hours than I had at the cafe, but earning enough to add to my college fund. In the evenings, Grandma and I would sit on the porch swing, drinking iced tea and talking about everything from politics to her youth growing up during the civil rights era. "Your grandfather and I didn't have much," she told me one evening, "but we believed in education. That was the one thing no one could take from you. Is that why you saved for my college? I asked. She nodded, her hands busy with knitting needles. That, and I know what it's like to be overlooked. I looked at her questioningly. I was the middle child of 5, she explained. Not the oldest with all the responsibility, not the youngest getting all the attention. Just Eleanor in the middle, expected to be sensible and self-sufficient. That sounds familiar, I said softly. She reached over and patted my hand. The overlooked ones often turn out to be the strongest. Remember that. In August, I moved into my dorm at the University of Michigan. Grandma Eleanor drove me there herself, her ancient Buick packed with twin XL bedding, desk lamps, and plastic storage containers. My parents had offered to come, but I politely declined, suggesting they needed to prepare for Lily's audition at the Pittsburgh Art School that same weekend. The truth was, I wanted this moment to be untainted by their comparisons or subtle reminders of how much they were sacrificing for Lily. I wanted to start this new chapter on my own terms. College was everything I had hoped for and more. I thrived in the academic environment, declaring a major in finance after discovering an aptitude for numbers in my introductory business courses. I made friends who knew nothing about my family dynamics, who saw me as Chelsea the debate champion, Chelsea the finance whiz, Chelsea who could drink anyone under the table at Friday night gatherings, a skill I never mentioned to Grandma Eleanor. Visited home for major holidays but kept my stays brief. Each visit followed the same pattern. Initial warmth followed by the gradual realization that nothing had changed. My parents still orbited around Lily, who had indeed been accepted to the Arts High School in Pittsburgh. Their house was now filled with her headshots and playbills from school productions. She has a real shot at Juilliard, Dad would tell me proudly during these visits. Her drama teachers say she's a natural. I would nod and smile and ask appropriate questions about her performances, all while feeling like a visitor in what had once been my home. By my junior year of college, I had secured a prestigious internship at a financial services firm in Chicago. The experience confirmed my career path. I loved the fast-paced environment, the challenge of solving complex financial problems, and yes, the promise of future financial stability that would ensure I never had to depend on anyone else. Grandma. Eleanor's home became my true home base during college breaks. She kept my room ready for me, the blue quilt freshly laundered before each visit. We established our own traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, movie nights on Fridays, long walks through the town cemetery where she would tell me stories about the local families memorialized there. History is just stories, she would say, as we wandered among the headstones. Everyone deserves to have their story remembered. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance. Grandma Eleanor beamed from the audience, tears streaming unashamedly down her face as I crossed the stage. My parents and Lily attended as well, my father capturing the moment on his camera while my mother dabbed delicately at her eyes. At the small celebration afterward, as we gathered at a restaurant near campus, Dad raised his glass in a toast. To Chelsea, he said, smiling broadly. The first Mitchell to graduate with honors. We're so proud of you. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest at his words, a long-buried desire for parental approval suddenly surfacing. Then he continued. And soon, we'll be celebrating Lily's acceptance to Juilliard. What a year for our family. The warmth faded as quickly as it had appeared. Some things never changed. After graduation, I moved to Chicago to accept a position at Apex Financial, a mid-sized firm with an excellent reputation. I found an apartment in a renovated brownstone, small but with character, within walking distance of Lake Michigan. For the first time, I had a space that was entirely my own, decorated according to my tastes, with no one else's needs or preferences to consider. Threw myself into my career, working long hours and impressing my supervisors with my dedication and analytical skills. I was promoted twice in my first 3 years at the firm, moving from analyst to associate and then to senior associate with a corresponding increase in salary and responsibilities. My relationship with my family settled into a comfortable distance. I called home once every 2 weeks, exchanged pleasantries, and inquired about Lily's progress. She had indeed been accepted to Juilliard, fulfilling my parents' dreams for her. I sent appropriate gifts for birthdays and Christmas, visited for a day or two at Thanksgiving, and spent most of my holiday time with Grandma Eleanor. It was during my 4th year at Apex Financial that the carefully constructed equilibrium of my life began to shift. I had just been promoted to junior portfolio manager, a position that came with a significant salary increase and my own office, albeit a small one. I celebrated by taking Grandma Eleanor on a weekend trip to New York, where we saw 2 Broadway shows and ate at restaurants we had only read about in magazines. "You're doing well for yourself," she observed as we shared an absurdly expensive dessert at a restaurant overlooking Central Park. "I always knew you would." "Thanks to you," I replied, raising my glass of champagne. "I wouldn't be here without your support." She waved away my gratitude. "Nonsense. I just provided opportunity. You did all the work." 2 weeks after our New York trip, I received an unexpected call from my father. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just returned to my apartment after a long day at the office. "Chelsea," he said, his voice tight with stress. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Dad," I replied, kicking off my heels and sinking onto my sofa. "Busy with work. What's up?" He cleared his throat. "Well, your mother and I have hit a bit of a rough patch financially." I sat up straighter. "What kind of rough patch?" "The housing market has been challenging for your mother's business," he explained. "And my company has announced layoffs. Nothing's certain yet, but I'm concerned." I waited for him to continue, a knot forming in my stomach. "We've also had some unexpected expenses with Lily's education," he added. "The cost of living in New York is astronomical, and she needs proper clothing and materials for her program." The knot tightened as I recognized the direction of this conversation. "I hate to ask this," he continued, "but you're doing so well in your career. Would it be possible for you to help us out temporarily, just until things stabilize?" I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, concern for my parents' situation, satisfaction that they were finally turning to me for something, and wariness about the temporary nature of their request. "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "20,000 would get us through the next few months," he replied quickly, as if he had already calculated the figure. I nearly choked. $20,000 was a substantial sum, even with my recent promotion. "That's a lot of money, Dad." "I know, sweetheart, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. We might lose the house if we can't catch up on the mortgage." The house. The 4-bedroom colonial in the desirable school district that had been my childhood home. Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of my parents losing it. "I'll need to move some investments around," I said after a long pause. "Can I let you know in a few days?" "Of course," he replied, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for considering it, Chelsea. I knew we could count on you." After we hung up, I sat in my darkening apartment, turning the request over in my mind. Part of me, the wounded child who had handed over half her cafe earnings, wanted to refuse. But another part, the financially secure adult who had moved beyond those old hurts, recognized that helping family in a crisis was the right thing to do. I called Grandma Eleanor the next day, seeking her perspective. "20,000 is a significant amount," she said after I explained the situation. "Are you comfortable with that?" "Financially, yes," I admitted. "I've been fortunate in my career, and I've saved and invested well. But emotionally, you're worried it will open old wounds," she finished for me. "Exactly. And I'm concerned about where the money will actually go." She was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps you could offer assistance with specific expenses rather than a lump sum. Like paying their mortgage directly?" "Precisely," she confirmed. "That way, You know exactly how your help is being used." It was sensible advice, and I decided to follow it. I called my father back and offered to make 3 months' worth of mortgage payments directly to their lender, rather than giving them the full amount he had requested. His hesitation was brief, but noticeable. "That's very generous, Chelsea, but we have other pressing expenses as well." "I understand," I replied firmly, "but this is what I'm comfortable with right now. I can pay the mortgage directly and then reassess in 3 months." He agreed, though not without a hint of disappointment. I arranged for the payments, nearly $10,000 in total, and told myself this was the mature approach. I was helping my family while maintaining appropriate boundaries. For a while, it seemed to work. I received grateful calls from both parents, assuring me that my assistance had relieved their most immediate financial stress. Mom's real estate business was picking up again, they said, and Dad's position at the company appeared secure after all. Then, about 2 months after I'd begun helping with their mortgage, I received a call from Lily. We had maintained a cordial, if distant, relationship over the years. She was now 23 and in her final year at Juilliard. "Chelsea," she began without preamble, "I need your advice about something." "Sure," I replied, surprised by her call. "What's up?" "Mom and Dad want me to go on this incredible study abroad program in London this summer," she explained. "It's with the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and it would look amazing on my resume. But it's really expensive, and they're hesitant because they say they're having money problems." My heart sank as she continued. "But then I saw that they just booked a 2-week vacation to Hawaii for their anniversary, and I don't understand how they can afford that, but not my program. Do you think I should confront them about it?" I gripped my phone tighter. "They're going to Hawaii?" "Yeah, in May. Dad said it was a special package deal they couldn't pass up. But my program costs about the same, and they're saying they can't afford it. It doesn't make sense." It didn't make sense indeed, unless the financial crisis they had described to me had been exaggerated or entirely fabricated. After speaking with Lily, I did something I had never done before. I called my parents' mortgage company, posing as my mother, a deception I'm not proud of, and inquired about the status of their account. To my shock, I discovered they had been making their regular mortgage payments all along, even before my contributions began. The financial crisis had been a fabrication or, at best, a significant exaggeration. The money I had provided, money I thought was saving their home, had apparently funded a Hawaiian vacation instead. I felt sick with the realization. Not just because they had deceived me, but because I had allowed myself to believe they had changed, that they finally valued me enough to be honest. I confronted them during my next visit home, a hastily arranged weekend trip spurred by my discovery. I spoke to Lily. I began, as we sat in their living room, the same room where I had watched Lily open countless extravagant birthday gifts while I received practical necessities. "She mentioned you're planning a trip to Hawaii." My mother smiled brightly. "Yes, for our 30th anniversary. We found a wonderful package deal." "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice steady, "because I was under the impression that you were struggling financially. Struggling so much that you needed my help with the mortgage." The smile faded from her face. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his armchair. "Well, things have improved recently," he began. "Have they?" "Because I checked with your mortgage company. You've never been behind on payments. Not once." A heavy silence fell over the room. My parents exchanged glances, a wordless communication that excluded me just as their conversations had throughout my childhood. "We were being proactive," Dad finally said. "We could see financial difficulties on the horizon, and we wanted to prevent falling behind. By asking me for $20,000 under false pretenses?" My voice rose, despite my efforts to remain calm. "It wasn't false," Mom interjected. "We have had expenses, Lily's education, maintenance on the house, medical bills. And now, a vacation to Hawaii," I finished for her. "We work hard," she countered defensively. "We deserve a nice anniversary trip." I shook my head, a sad laugh escaping me. That's not the point. The point is that you lied to me. You made me believe you were about to lose your home when that was never the case. We didn't lie, Dad insisted. We were concerned about our financial future. Concerned enough to book a luxury vacation? I challenged. He had no response to that. I stood up, suddenly needing to be anywhere but in that room, in that house, filled with memories of always coming second. I'm done, I said quietly. No more money, no more bailouts. I have supported myself since I was 16 years old, working at a cafe while you diverted my earnings to Lily's dance lessons and acting classes. I put myself through college with Grandma's help while you funded Lily's arts education. And now, when I'm finally secure in my own life, you fabricate a crisis to take advantage of my success. That's not fair, Chelsea, Mom protested. We've always supported you. No, I interrupted. Years of suppressed feelings finally breaking free. You tolerated me. You provided the bare minimum while pouring all your resources and attention into Lily. And that was your choice as parents. But now I'm making my choice. I won't be your backup plan or your financial safety net. I left that day, driving straight to Grandma Eleanor's house, where I spent the night before returning to Chicago. She listened to my story without judgment, offering comfort in the form of tea and her quiet presence. You set a boundary, she said, as we sat at her kitchen table. That's healthy. It doesn't feel healthy, I admitted. It feels terrible. Necessary things often do at first, she replied, but you'll be stronger for it. In the weeks that followed, I received numerous calls and messages from my parents, ranging from angry accusations to tearful apologies. I responded minimally, maintaining my position that our financial relationship was over. Lily called once, confused about what had happened, and I explained as gently as I could that I needed some distance from our parents. I don't understand, she said. They've always been supportive of both of us. It was clear we had grown up in the same house but experienced entirely different childhoods. Rather than try to convince her otherwise, I simply told her that I loved her but needed to establish healthier boundaries with our parents. The real test came 3 months later at Grandma Eleanor's 75th birthday party. She had insisted on having the whole family gather at her home for a celebration, and I couldn't refuse her request. It would be the first time I would see my parents since our confrontation. I arrived early to help with preparations, arranging chairs in the backyard, and setting up a buffet table under the old oak tree. By mid-afternoon, the small gathering was in full swing, a few of Grandma's friends from town, some distant cousins I barely knew, and eventually, my parents and Lily. The initial greetings were awkward but civil. We all tacitly agreed to maintain the facade of family harmony in front of others. But as the afternoon wore on and glasses of wine were consumed, the carefully constructed peace began to fray. It started with a seemingly innocent comment from one of Grandma's friends. "You must be so proud of both your girls," she said to my parents. "Chelsea with her successful finance career and Lily at Juilliard, such accomplishments." "Oh, we are," Mom replied with a tight smile. "Though it's easier to be proud when your child doesn't abandon you at the first sign of trouble." An uncomfortable silence fell over the small group that had gathered around the punch bowl. Grandma Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, though her social graces prevented her from creating a scene. "I'd hardly call a Hawaiian vacation trouble, Mom," I responded quietly. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed. "That's enough, Chelsea. This is your grandmother's birthday, not the place for airing grievances." "You're right," I agreed. "I apologize, Grandma, but the damage was done." The tension between us hung in the air like the humidity before a summer storm. Later, as guests began to depart, my father cornered me in the kitchen as I was wrapping leftover cake. "We need to talk about your behavior," he began, his voice low. "Your mother and I have always given you everything you needed." "No, Dad," I interrupted, setting down the roll of plastic wrap. You gave me what you thought I needed after ensuring Lily had everything she wanted. There's a difference." "That's not true," he insisted. "We treated you both fairly." I laughed, a short, sad sound. "Do you really believe that? The forgotten birthdays? The secondhand clothes while Lily got designer labels, taking half my cafe earnings for family expenses that somehow always benefited Lily more than me?" "You were always more independent," he countered. "Lily needed more support." "Lily needed more support because you taught her to need it," I replied. "You taught her that she was special, exceptional, deserving of every advantage. And you taught me that I was on my own." He shook his head, unwilling or unable to see the truth in my words. "And now," I continued, "when I've finally built a life for myself, you fabricate a financial crisis to take advantage of my success. That's not what loving parents do." "We never asked for much," he protested. "You asked for $20,000 based on a lie," I reminded him. "That's not much." Before he could respond, Grandma Eleanor entered the kitchen, her timing impeccable as always. "Everything all right in here?" she asked, though her expression made it clear she knew it wasn't. "Just having a discussion," Dad replied, forcing a smile. "Well, discussions can wait," she said firmly. "There's cake to be served." As she directed us back to the party, she caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod of understanding and support. In that moment, I felt a profound gratitude for her presence in my life, the one family member who had consistently seen me for who I was. The party ended without further incident, though the tension between my parents and me remained unresolved. As they prepared to leave, Mom pulled me aside. "We raised you better than this," she said, her voice low and hurt. "To turn your back on family." "I haven't turned my back on family," I corrected her. "I've set boundaries with people who have repeatedly tried to take advantage of me. There's a difference." "We're your parents," she insisted. "Everything we ever did was for you girls." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the infallible mother of my childhood, but a woman who had made choices, some good and some bad, shaped by her own values and limitations. "I know you believe that," I said finally, "and I hope one day you'll understand why I had to step back." After they left, I helped Grandma Eleanor clean up, working in companionable silence as we washed dishes and folded tablecloths. "You did well today," she said as we finished, sinking into her favorite armchair with a sigh of contentment. "It's not easy to stand your ground." "They think I'm being selfish and ungrateful," I replied, sitting across from her. "People often confuse healthy boundaries with selfishness," she observed, "especially when those boundaries challenge their expectations." I nodded, feeling the wisdom in her words. "I don't want to cut them out of my life entirely. They're still my parents, but I can't keep sacrificing my well-being for their approval." "Nor should you," she agreed. "Relationships change as we grow. Sometimes they improve, sometimes they fade, but they all teach us something about ourselves." In the months that followed, I maintained minimal contact with my parents. Birthday calls, holiday greetings, occasional updates on major life events. It wasn't the close family relationship I had once yearned for, but it was honest, and it preserved my hard-won independence. Lily graduated from Juilliard and began auditioning for roles in New York. To everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, she struggled in the competitive theater world. The exceptional talent that had been celebrated and nurtured throughout her childhood was revealed to be merely good in the context of professional performing arts. After a year of limited success, she called me one evening, her voice small and uncertain. "I don't know what to do, Chelsea," she confessed. "I've been on dozens of auditions and barely booked anything. Mom and Dad keep saying the right role is just around the corner, but you're not sure if that's true," I finished for her. "Exactly. And they've already spent so much on my education, I feel like I'm letting them down." My heart softened toward my sister. For the first time, she was experiencing the weight of expectations she hadn't asked for but had been trained to fulfill. You're not letting anyone down, I assured her. Finding. Your path takes time, and it might not be the path everyone expected for you. There was a long pause before she spoke again. How did you do it? Know what you wanted and just go for it? I considered the question carefully. I didn't always know what I wanted, but I knew I needed to be self-sufficient. Everything else grew from that. We talked for over an hour that night, really talked, in a way we never had as children or teenagers. By the end of the conversation, Lily had decided to explore arts administration positions that would keep her connected to theater while providing more stability than acting. 3 weeks later, she called again with news. She had landed an assistant position at a nonprofit theater company in Brooklyn. The pay was modest, but it was a start. They liked that I had performance experience, she told me excitedly, and I get to be part of productions without the stress of auditioning all the time. That's wonderful, Lily, I said, genuinely happy for her. How did Mom and Dad take the news? Her enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Dad said it's a good fallback while I continue auditioning. Mom thinks I'm giving up too soon. And what do you think? I pressed. I think I'm relieved, she admitted. I love theater, but I don't think I love performing as much as everyone thought I did, or maybe as much as I was supposed to. It was a moment of clarity for her, the beginning of a separation between her identity and the expectations that had been placed upon her. I recognized it because I had experienced my own version years earlier, working at the cafe and discovering what it meant to be valued for my own efforts. Trust that feeling, I advised her. It's telling you something important. Over the next year, my relationship with Lily strengthened as she developed her own identity, independent of our parents' expectations. We met for weekend visits in Chicago or New York, exploring museums and trying new restaurants, finding common ground as adults that had eluded us as children. My parents remained distant, occasionally reaching out with news or holiday wishes, but always with an undercurrent of hurt and disapproval. I maintained my boundaries firmly, but without malice, remembering Grandma Eleanor's wisdom about relationships changing as we grow. Grandma Eleanor remained my anchor and confidant. When I was promoted to full portfolio manager at Apex Financial, she was the first person I called. When I met Julian, an architectural engineer who shared my love of obscure documentaries and spicy food, she was the first to know when our relationship became serious. He treats you with respect, she observed after meeting him for the first time. That's the foundation of everything good. When Julian proposed a year later, I accepted without hesitation. We planned a small wedding at a historic hotel overlooking Lake Michigan with just 60 guests in attendance. The guest list brought inevitable questions. How would I navigate the complicated relationships with my parents? Would inviting them reopen old wounds or provide an opportunity for healing? After much consideration and several long conversations with Julian and Grandma Eleanor, I sent them an invitation. It was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that despite our differences, they were still my parents and part of my history. Their response was cautiously positive. They would attend, they assured me, and looked forward to meeting Julian and his family. The wedding day arrived with perfect early autumn weather, clear skies, gentle breezes, and trees just beginning to show hints of gold and red. Grandma Eleanor, elegant in a blue suit that matched her eyes and the bedroom she had given me years ago, walked me down the aisle. It was non-traditional, perhaps, but it felt right to have her by my side at this threshold. My parents sat in the front row, appropriately dressed and outwardly supportive. Lily, serving as my maid of honor, had blossomed into a confident young woman with a growing career in arts administration. She had recently been promoted to program coordinator at her theater company and had started dating another administrator from a different arts organization. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with vows Julian and I had written ourselves that spoke of partnership, respect, and building a life of shared purpose. As we exchanged rings, I caught Grandma Eleanor's eye and saw tears of joy shimmering there. I felt a profound sense of rightness, that despite the complicated journey, I had arrived exactly where I was meant to be. At the reception, as Julian and I moved among our guests, I found myself face to face with my father near the champagne fountain. "You look beautiful," he said, awkwardness evident in his stiff posture. "And happy." "I am happy," I confirmed. "Very much so." He nodded, glancing around at the elegant reception. "You've done well for yourself, built a good life." "Yes," I agreed, simply. He hesitated, then continued. "Your mother and we're proud of you, Chelsea. I know we haven't always shown it the way we should have, but we are." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I had grown to expect. But all I saw was an aging man attempting, perhaps for the first time, to bridge the gap between us. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." We didn't resolve everything in that brief exchange. Decades of hurt and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single conversation. But it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall that had grown between us. Later that evening, as Julian and I shared our first dance as a married couple, I looked around at the faces surrounding us, my new husband's loving family, our friends. From college and work, Grandma Eleanor beaming proudly, Lily enthusiastically taking photos, and my parents, watchful but present. I realized then that family is both what we're given and what we create. The families we're born into shape us, for better or worse, but they don't define us. We have the power to build connections based on mutual respect and genuine care, to surround ourselves with people who see us clearly and value us completely. As the music swelled and Julian spun me gently across the dance floor, I felt a sense of completion. Not because all the broken pieces of my past had been mended, but because I had learned to carry those pieces forward into a future of my own making. Later that night, Grandma Eleanor found me alone for a moment on the hotel terrace, gazing up at the stars over Lake Michigan. "A penny for your thoughts," she said, joining me at the railing. "I was just thinking about journeys," I replied. "How we never really know where they'll lead." She nodded, her wise eyes reflecting the party lights strung above us. "The important thing is to keep moving forward, even when the path isn't clear." "You taught me that," I said, taking her hand in mine. "You taught me so much." "No," she corrected, gently. "I just reminded you of what you already knew. The strength was always yours." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight shimmer on the lake's surface. In that moment, I felt the full circle of my journey, from the overlooked child desperately seeking approval to the woman who had learned to approve of herself. The wounds of my childhood would always be part of me, thin scars that occasionally ached when the weather changed. But they no longer defined me. I had built something stronger on that foundation, a life of purpose, love, and self-respect. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.